Hey everybody, thanks for joining me as I take a look at another stack of Canadian metal releases. And we're going to start off with Nocturnal Departure, a Canadian black metal band from Winnipeg. And this is their second and most recent full-length album, Clandestine Theurgy, released 2022 on Hell's Headbangers. There's the band photo there. So again, we're talking black metal, and at its core, old school influences. We're talking old Darkthrone meets old Burzum, but overall, I'd say a much more interesting take on vocals and drumming, like more active drums with more interesting choices, and the vocals more of a two vocal approach styles. You have the more black metal, the more death metal vocal, and then at the most unique of times, it brings to mind Rest from Leviathan, who I should also mention is probably the most clear modern influence on the band, Leviathan. So I definitely look forward to checking out the debut album, as this was a very fitting companion during many drives to work in this particularly bad Ontario winter. Gonna get a little closer to home here. This is The Forgotten by Rotting. Rotting were a death metal band from Newmarket, Ontario, Canada. One town north of me, but I can drive into the Newmarket city limits within 2 minutes from my front door. So the band would go on to release an album in 1998, Crushed. I do own that on CD, but Hell's Headbangers re-released it on vinyl, and they are gonna put out another edition of it fairly soon, which is supposed to be the best edition, so I'm definitely gonna wait and pick that up when it's available. But this is compiling a lot of their material from before the release of Crushed in 1998. It was initially put out independently, limited to 50 copies, but it has been re-released on CDN, remastered by Dan Swano. So again, Crushed is much better material, but this is decent, straightforward death metal. My favorite song on here is probably the song called Rotting. Definitely shows their strong obituary influence, which is probably overall the band I find myself referencing the most when listening to them. But songs like Diseased and Doomsday kind of throw a bit of deicide in there. I Want You Dead goes into some Cannibal Corpse worship. Then Bear Attack doing more of a death grind thing. So not one-dimensional, kind of taking a couple different styles of death metal here. And apparently the band is active again as of 2025. A couple original members, a couple new members. I don't think the original vocalist is part of the newest incarnation. Are they based out of Newmarket anymore? I have no idea, but that would be cool. Maybe catch a local gig, maybe pick up a new release from a local record store. But in any case, we will see what happens. Okay, next up, we're gonna talk about something a little different. This is Indian Handcrafts, a rock band from Barrie, Ontario, about an hour north of Toronto, with strong stoner rock and metal influences. Tell you a quick story about how I first became aware of Indian Handcrafts. Back in 2011, I went to see Death Heaven and Russian Circles perform at Lee's Palace in Toronto. And this is Death Heaven touring for Rose to Judea. And you know what? I've always liked Death Heaven. You know, some releases are better than others, but the first album I thought was great. The second and third were very good. And then there's something of value on pretty much everything, I personally think. But in any case, for whatever reason, Death Heaven did not make the show. I don't think they got across the border. So Russian Circles became the headliner, and the opening band was a band called Indian Handcrafts. And they were just a two-piece, guitars and vocals, with a drummer. And at the time, I kind of consider them more of like kind of a punky, high-energy rock band. And the funny thing about that was, although it was far from my first time, that show was definitely an edible experience gone very wrong, and I was freaked out through that whole show. But I definitely remember it, and, you know, all these years later, my wife and I, we still joke about seeing Indian Handcrafts and how I was just white as a ghost, but still trying to enjoy the show. And so I did purchase the MP3s of the second album, but kind of forgot about them, just kind of remember the name. It turns out that these guys, and especially the new bass player, because they've added a third member to the band, they seem to be buds with the guys from my local record store. So they had some of their stuff in stock, and we talked about the band a couple times, and I bought a couple things. This is the second full-length album, Creeps, released on Sargent House. And I want to see the band was on Metal Archives, and they actually are. And it does state in the notes they were permitted to be on Metal Archives due to the release of this album, which seems to be the most metal thing they've ever put out. Released in 2015, and I think this is an awesome album. The biggest influence is definitely Melvins, and probably even more so Big Business, who are a Melvins associated act. I kind of fell off with the Melvins, but the two members of Big Business did join the Melvins. Maybe they're still a member of the band. I really don't know anymore. But the first song, Down at the Docks, that is a real Big Business type number. The second song, It's Late Queenie, has a real Kyuss influence. And then as the album goes on, like, I'd say the biggest influences to me would be like a more straightforward Mastodon and a less heavy High on Fire. I say the last song on here, Rat Face Snorter, is almost, it's a borderline doom metal song. So this is an awesome release. Totally recommend you check it out. It's on a single black vinyl. And we're not done talking about Indian Handcrafts. This is their fourth and most recent full-length album, released in 2022 on Beth Lab. This is Empress in Decline. I will say right away that I much prefer the preceding album, Creeps. It just rocks harder, and as much as I do dig this, it does feel a little bit more meandering and a little bit closer to the stoner rock take. However, I'd also say that the influences seem less obvious, and it seems that the band's coming more into their own unique sound. Favorite songs on here are back-to-back tracks. You have New Death Therapy, which is a short psychedelic instrumental, and then following that, I'd say Feral Cats, which has a riff and a drum part that seems to be a very obvious reference to Live Undead by Slayer, but who can blame them? That song has only got one of the best endings in metal history. Gonna throw the closer, Petulant Twiggy, in there as another really strong track. And Indian Handcrafts have been added to the lineup for the Prepare the Ground festival in Toronto. I bought my tickets months ago, so just another great reason to go. Heard rumors of a local show in the summer. Hope that all works out. I got the second album in the mail coming, and expect to hear more about Indian Handcrafts. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.